Vicki. That's okay. So please accept this unless you're in the witness protection program. And then if that's the case, change your name so that you're protected, because recording means we might put this on the internet. You don't have to say where you live or anything like that. We're glad to see you today. And you know, if nothing else, it's always good for us as a Matthew 25 mid-council, a mid-council that has promised and signed on to be mindful and thoughtful and prayerful in our programming, in our mission, in our support for the work of Matthew 25, which one of my esteemed colleagues who happens to be on the call today said, in many ways is a no-brainer. You know, why wouldn't we all sign on to be Matthew 25 congregations? Because of what Matthew 25 asks of us as people of faith. The commitments in the denomination's vision and initiative for Matthew 25 is to work toward thoughtfully, prayerfully, intentionally toward the eradication of poverty, the elimination of systemic racism, and the addressing of and the commitment to congregational vitality. You know, in a lot of ways, that's motherhood and apple pie, isn't it? And baseball, although we won't say which league you favor. And yet, like so many things in our world today, there are divisions and there is contentiousness, and there are folks who've said that they have a challenging time with Matthew 25 because it's demanding of them attention to things that they think are more political than theological. I don't know about you, but I think the gospel is quite political. It's not partisan, but it's political, and it asks us to take sides, and it asks us to take sides for the poor and the marginalized, and to draw the circle wider, and to be people who continue to say that love makes room. So my hope is that we don't have to make a really strong case with this choir that we're preaching to today of folks who've either signed on from Matthew 25 or are living that even without a formal commitment. Some people just don't like to make formal commitments, right? They don't hand in pledge cards, but they're among the most generous givers in our congregations, right? People just don't want to be held to a must when they want it to be a may. And that's fine. And we celebrate that as well. We have some amazingly deep commitments to important ministries, like congregations that will probably not ever sign on to Matthew 25. And that's okay. That's okay. We're a Matthew 25 mid-council presbytery. And so we're going to claim those ministries and missions and acts of movement toward justice and wholeness for all people. Every time we can, we're going to be spotters, you know, just like all the cartoons we watch in this house. You know, we're the Paw Patrol, we're the PJ Masks, we're the Octonauts of peace and justice in this world. So I want to hear from you. I'm going to share my screen for a minute and remind you of our congregations who have made a commitment to Matthew 25, formal commitments, not just that we're going to do this, but we're not going to sign the papers. Here they are. Very cool. Crown Point first, Goshen first, Highland first, Bethany and Central Presbyterian churches in Lafayette, Lake Village Presbyterian, First Mishawaka, First Michigan City, Westminster and Munster, First Peru, Community Presbyterian in Rochester, Emmanuel in Schererville, First and Sunnyside in South Bend, First in Valparaiso, Christ Presbyterian Church in Winfield, which is a suburb. It's unincorporated Crown Point. Some interesting things to note about this cool list is that First Presbyterian in Goshen was the first congregation to sign on in our presbytery as a Matthew 25 congregation, and Crown Point First is our most recent. Those are kind of exciting landmarks along the way. We have some folks who are have their marketing mojo completely down. I think they've got, you know, special ninjas in their midst, and First South Bend is one of them. One of the congregations that's working so hard and sharing and shining a light on their Matthew 25 work. And then we have other congregations that signed on to Matthew 25 because they said, this is who we are anyway. Lake Village, little tiny Lake Village, that has 27 folks on the rolls of the church, signed on because they have a weekly commitment to feed 700 people in Newton and Lake counties every single week. And they've been doing it for years, you know, an area exponentially larger than their congregational membership. So there's lots of stuff going on. The South Bend First has had a commitment all through Lent and Eastertide on systemic racism, and they've had beautiful partnerships with Notre Dame and community theater groups, and have hosted lots of things. I want to hear about what you know about, and this is a chance for you to brag if you want to, or to shine a light on someone you know about and some place you know about that's doing exciting Matthew 25 things. Who's interested in priming the pump for us and sharing a little bit about what you know, what you see, what you've spotted related to Matthew 25 work in our midst? Lovely background music playing while you think. Hard to be first. Let me ask another question, because I think sometimes one of the hardest things, you know, while we all want to have the marketing team of First South Bend in our back pockets, sometimes the work of the church is such that it takes all the energy we have, and tooting our horns or publicizing it or sharing it feels like, wait a second, I thought I was supposed to not let the right hand know what the left hand was doing, you know, or something I hear all the time, well, this is nothing special. I don't know that I would lift it up as, you know, anything stellar. But I think that, you know, even when we share those things that seem mundane to us, we remind others that what they're doing counts or is accessible, and doesn't have to have a cast of thousands or costumes or, you know, anything particularly elaborate. So let me ask you another question. I know that there are a majority of folks around this call who are from Matthew 25 congregations. I'd be interested in hearing you talk about, for a minute, about how your congregations discerned and deliberated about signing on. First off, tell me a rear view mirror story. Tell me this is how we said yes to Matthew 25 as a session. Evan, you all were early adopters at Bethany. Are you willing? I know you're not afraid of speaking on Zoom.
I am not afraid of speaking on Zoom. Yeah, I'm willing. I think I was one of those who said signing on to Matthew 25 was a bit of a no-brainer. You know, the three facets of Matthew 25 are congregational vitality, the dismantling of structural racism, and the eradication of systemic poverty. I get dismantling and eradicated sometimes mixed up on which
I
one
do
it goes
too.
with.
I just say destroy and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Horrible militaristic language. Yeah, blowing up the
but
system.
and you know, not to brag, but I do think Bethany has had more than a toe in the water in two of those areas. The congregational vitality, which is described as not or is discerned not by number of members or financial resources, but by engagement in the community. You know, we are a congregation that has been deeply engaged in the community. And the eradication of poverty, we have done a number of things to address the issue of poverty, and specifically the issue of food insecurity as a result of poverty. And so we were already doing reasonably well in two of the areas. And so again, it was kind of a sense of, this is what we're doing. We recognize that the racism leg of that three-legged stool is the one where we have the growing edge. And it is a growing edge for us. As I talk about that, I also talk about that in terms of the toxic othering of people. And so not only along the lines of race, but the other dividers that we put in place to other people. And Bethany is a congregation that has been a welcoming and inclusive congregation, and been fairly public about being welcoming and inclusive along other dividers, not specific to race, but to specifically sexual orientation and gender identity. And so it's still our growing edge, but it's not totally foreign concept to us either. So that's where we are. That's kind of there wasn't a lot of discernment to it. It was, we're kind of working on most of this stuff, and recognize that this is what churches are supposed to be doing. And I will say a larger piece of that discernment process happened years ago through the work of the Presbytery in the missional transformation process. And so it was really that work that the Presbytery reported, or that the Presbytery promoted, over a decade ago, that got us thinking along those lines. And that's on the timeline where we began to grow in those other two areas of issues of poverty and church vitality.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I have like 16 follow-up questions, but I know we have other congregations represented too. So, if we get really, really quiet again, I've got my questions ready for you and for others. So other folks, talk to me about how your congregations said yes to Matthew 25 and what that took. I asked specifically because I know we have some folks on the call who are in congregations and serving congregations that are not or not yet Matthew 25 congregations. And I think it's kind of helpful to peek into other windows a little bit, legally, not creepily, to hear about process and maybe learn a little bit from that. Anybody else want to talk about the process, the discernment, the decision? Kim, thanks.
Well, mine will be short, but like Kevin, I we just thought the session voted on it because it was a no-brainer. Of course, we'd be a Matthew 25 church, but we wanted that label on us so that we could build on education. And we were already doing a lot of the work that a Matthew 25 church does, but it's important to bring awareness and to bring education to what we're doing, why we're doing it, and to make things better known of what's going on in our society or around us, community or worldwide. And so at that time, I volunteered to be the moderator of the Matthew 25 team, which has been a learning experience because it also works with mission, also works with Christian education. It really works with every aspect of the church. So it's interesting how you can incorporate it into everything.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Thanks for reminding us of that and setting it in the forefront. Please remind me, you serve at
First Presbyterian in Valpo.
In Valpo. I was going to say Valpo, and then I thought, ooh, what if I'm wrong? That would be weird.
Nope, you're right.
And start spreading rumors. I didn't want to do that. I thought you were at Valpo, and Valpo has really lifted up Matthew 25 in these last 24 months a lot too. I want to get back to you, be thinking about stuff that's happened and commitments and further deep dives during, the time of awfulness and time of challenge that has been and is the pandemic. Anybody else want to talk about the process of signing on and the why for deciding to do so if your congregation hasn't been spoken for yet? Karen, can I call on you even though you're not visible to us today? Maybe you and
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Hi. Maybe you and Alan can do a tag team because it's a past question.
Yes, no, my apologies. I was getting my food around and rushing around, so I didn't want you to be.
Oh, that's why it's called
motion
lunch.
Sickness.
No, that's why it's called lunch and learn.
Well, we were encouraged to become a Matthew 25 church at Goshen First Presbyterian, of course, by Alan at the time. And I think we had goals that we wanted to get towards. We haven't made a ton of progress in that direction. So I would be interested to hear what you other churches are doing that achieve those goals, because that would really help us, because Matthew 25 is a big thing. And it would help us to narrow that down to manageable steps that we can achieve. But I think we're excited to be under that umbrella because it gives us some goals to work towards. Now, of course, with any goal, you got to start with small steps. So that's what I would be interested in hearing. And we were encouraged by Alan because he's very proactive in those areas of eradicating poverty, systemic racism. All those things are his things that he challenged us on a lot. And so it went right along with the direction that we want to head. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Karen. I swear I saw a tennis ball and a net and it got hit and it's in your court, Alan Griffin. If you want to say anything now. Yeah, but you have to unmute yourself.
Sure. One of the things that the church was doing at that time, and obviously I don't know exactly what all's going on now, but the church was really involved in feeding homeless folks. We had been asked by the Homeless Coalition during the winter a few years ago to become a Sunday morning site because a church where they were spending the night had to leave by 8 o'clock, and before other warming places were open, we opened up and we're doing that initially just being a warming place with coffee. And then the folks decided, well, we need to feed folks. So we started having breakfast for them. And a few months later, it expanded into having Sunday evening meals. And then one of the saints of the church, Susie Hooley, organized with some other churches where they were providing evening meals, I think most days of the week. And so we kind of had this extension of food that we had always been providing. We were a church that did the Christmas Day dinner for many years, feeding 600 to 800 members and or folks in town on Christmas morning, and so it just was an extension of work that was going on. We also were involved, primarily Susie and I, in this kind of underground ministry of providing tents to homeless people. The city wasn't real happy with this effort. And some folks of one particular party were quite upset that they could see tents around on what they deemed public land and were not happy with us at all. But nevertheless, we provided tents, and they found, after the city was forced to remove them from near the mill race, we found some private land that folks would let them live on for a while. And so those were the kind of things that were going on that just made Matthew 25 seem to be a natural outgrowth of things that the church were involved with. So
Very
that's
good.
what I'm here.
Thank you both. That was a good volley. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm wondering, let me ask the what about the pandemic question related to Matthew 25, because honestly, every facet of Matthew 25 predominantly looks outward when it comes to most Presbyterian churches. We all have needs within our own churches, absolutely, and Matthew 25 doesn't make a distinction between whether we help people within or outside of our membership roles, right? But there is a strong missional focus. Congregational vitality, we all know, is so closely linked to drawing our circle wider, to being people who are radically inclusive and welcoming, and the dismantling of, I think, Kevin, you're right, we're dismantling racism and we're eradicating poverty when we sign on. I don't think Jesus really would care which word we use, but we want to be true to the initiative. So in the pandemic, which was a reset button for everybody and a pause button in some respects, but not in every respect, how did and does, because the pandemic's not over, the work of Matthew 25 get harder and easier for your congregation in a pandemic? And this is a question that invites you to, state the incredibly obvious, because it always feels good to be supported and accompanied in the things that are hard, and it's always uplifting to hear, what happened. Where did you find need during the pandemic? Where have you found need? Because that's some of what needs to be addressed with Matthew 25. And how have you done it? And what has been hard? Because it's been hard to gather, and it's been hard to communicate, and it's been hard to sustain energy. Karen.
Sorry. I appreciated Alan's more thorough response. And it reminded me of, now in answering your question, Jennifer, I would say that the pandemic caused us to shift the way we served for a long time, but then ultimately in the end, we've stopped doing that ministry because our main volunteer kind of got burnt out. But it wasn't just burnt out from the work, but it was also from the folks that she was serving, because they are sometimes fairly taxing emotionally, and asked of her more than she could give sometimes in a physical way. And I don't mean, just like in the needs that they had and the time they wanted from her. So we had to take a break from that. So I guess the pandemic really helped us expand in some ways, because we did expand to many nights a week. And maybe the outgrowth of that was then that led to more need, which then led us to stop. But I don't know, I think it was good and bad. But what I also think our stopping did was, just in our own community, helped some of our own other community resources get back into the game too. So there was good and bad, but that's my answer to your question.
It sounds like it ignited broader support in some ways, other community organizations, as you say. That's a good thing, to be able to call yourself a small c or a capital C catalyst, not capitalist, catalyst. Yeah,
I think so. And I think
that's very cool.
one of the things I enjoyed about it was just getting to know those folks and feeling less intimidated by them, because I see them around town. I have a downtown business. One of them stops in to say hi to my staff often, likes to call me Lady Wellington, which I think everyone should call me. So there's that. So in some ways, there was a lot of good that came out of that. I know it's kind of funny. And I do hope we can get back to that. But I think what I gathered, Ecclesiastes tells us there's a time for everything. And we had a time and now we don't. And maybe we'll go back to that because of the things that we've learned and we've seen. So I think that was our part to play. And I think we played it well in the pandemic. I'm with Ellen. I have to give Susie a lot of credit. She really persevered during the pandemic and was there for those folks when other places weren't. And it was a big outpouring for her. But it brought some other things to light too in other community organizations. But anyway, that's it.
That's a great answer. And it's such a beautiful setup for, the things we know, but sometimes, get in a bit of a rut. I think the church for centuries has been a ministry to organization, meaning we serve the poor, we help the homeless. And I think one of the important things about missional work, work in the current age, that we learn and relearn and have to kind of shift gears on is ministries with rather than ministries for. That when we work beside people, when we think about the importance of and the challenge for lots of us with building relationships. I think getting a royal title, Lady Wellington, is about ministry with, right? That's about a person who's comfortable seeing you and knowing that will make you smile and laugh and engaging, and you seeing them as a person to be in relationship with, not just somebody to give a handout. It's more a willingness to hold hands, so to speak, with hand sanitizer in this time, because to fist bump with, to elbow bump with. Anyway, ministries for versus ministries with. And that's challenging for us as congregations, especially when it comes to dismantling systemic racism, right? Because for most PCUSA congregations, not all of them, and certainly very few of the new worshiping communities in our midst, and the majority of our congregations are very, very white. And so it often lends itself to a false dichotomy, right? So how do we have those conversations and do more than simply learn? Because I think Presbyterians have have a premium in lots of respects on being people who want to educate ourselves on things and learn and have book studies and say, well, we've done racism, right? And really, we've done some good, safe work in some respects. And it's not unimportant work, but it's the start and not the finish, right? So how have you found that to be both challenging and inspiring in your work? Those of you who have said, racism is our growing edge and we want to do more, and recognizing that everybody gets lots of grace in a pandemic. What have you noticed? What have you wondered about? What have you experienced on the topic of racism and how to address it with congregations? Don't all talk at once.
I think for us, the pandemic has been challenging, especially in that area. And I think for us, the issue of dismantling structural racism begins with conversation. It doesn't end with conversation, but it needs to begin there. And we became a Matthew 25 congregation in 2019. Again, recognized that the racism piece was our growing edge. And in 2020, well, let me back up. We had done the book Waking Up White when the denomination was reading that book. And so we did that as a summer series. And so there was some built-in awareness of the topic, but we started a film discussion series through Lent in 2020. And we were about 2 weeks into that when the pandemic shut everything down and we were no longer meeting in person. And our first entree into doing online worship was pretty rough. And that part of our film discussion series is that I had committed to using a clip from each film that we were discussing each week in the context of the sermon. And that did not carry and translate very well those first few weeks in pandemic. I wish we could go back and do that over again, because we're much better equipped to do that right now than we were at the time. The other piece to that is we didn't gather in person for anything for 18 months. And again, we were of the mind at the beginning of this that we were going to have to suspend in-person contact for 6 weeks, 3 months at the most, right?
Remember those days? Yeah.
Remember those days? And so we didn't immediately adopt some of the transformations that have empowered us to have those conversations now remotely. So it took us, several months to a year or more for the majority of our folks to be able to engage conversation in a remote way through Zoom or whatever. And not everybody's there yet. So that kind of conversation has been really tough through the pandemic. And also, it was especially tough because the pandemic heightened the awareness of the need for this work. I mean, it's in the midst of the pandemic that the George Floyd incident happened, and that the Black Lives Matter movement really began in earnest. And it was very tough to have meaningful conversation around those topics because it was just tough to have meaningful conversation in a group setting during that time. And so actually, I'm finishing up the newsletter article, the newsletter today to get out for next month. And we are just now resuming in-person adult Christian education at the beginning of June. And our first entree into that will be using the Matthew 25 curriculum on facing racism. So we're getting there, but it's been a really tough time because, again, through much of the pandemic, conversation was happening on a one-to-one basis, not in a group setting. So
Amen to all of that. May it go well for Bethany and friends in June. It's certainly not too late to be having these conversations, and some would maintain with all kinds of data to support it that there's no better time than now to be reacquainting, recommitting, re-engaging with the goals of Matthew 25 and the goals our congregations have set. I heard Dr. Liz Theo-Harris speak yesterday. She's one of the founders of the Poor People's Campaign with Dr. William Barber. And she was talking about the statistics you likely already know about related to how COVID has affected people of color and poor people in much, much, much greater numbers than in other parts of the population. And I think about how many congregations have said, it was kind of all hands on deck for us in the pandemic. We were so concerned about our own people and our own programs and our own ministries and how hard it was to serve when we were so isolated from one another. And yet, y'all remember what the Presbytery of Wabash Valley managed to pull off with respect to our RIP medical debt campaign? Pretty noteworthy stuff. We probably could have done a ton better, but we did right well for people who were saying, times are tough. There is generosity in our midst. There are invitations to share. There is hope to embody. And my hunch is that you've been doing that in ways that you take for granted in your congregations. Feeding programs have long been a way to say, well, we're just extending the hospitality of Jesus and he fed people too. Well, absolutely. and with good reason. And I highly commend to you, if you haven't had a chance to read the other book that the co-moderators suggested, encouraged right after Waking Up White. And it's Liz Theo-Harris's book. She's a Presbyterian minister. And it's called Always With Us, ? And the subtitle of the book is What Jesus Really Said About the Poor. And it's a dense read. It's filled with data because she's a data gatherer by trade. But it's provocative and it's thoughtful. I'm not sure it might be a study for you, but it's, if nothing else, it's a place for you to get energized and re-energized once again. I also want to say to you that we all know and are daunted by the diminishing numbers of people who are able to be present for things, whether in person or on Zoom, and the malaise that returning to things that we remember accurately or not about gathering have been. If the presbytery can be helpful to you, if you have a core group of people, but you're afraid that they'll be sad and lonely if there are only 3 people who want to gather around some stuff. If you're part of a congregation that has not yet adopted Matthew 25, but you are willing to give up a lunch date to be here with us, and you'd like the presbytery to host a call or host a study or do a Zoom, a Facebook group. We've done that for Waking Up White and had questions and things online that people can talk about on their own time, and then we gather at the end of a book for some discussion. We would be happy to do that, because that's part of our mission as the presbytery, is to help encourage congregations to awaken, aliven, and bear new fruit in the Spirit. And it seems to me that as a mid-council that's committed to Matthew 25, that's something we could do, is provide a platform for discussion. Because if there were 10 congregations that had 3 people each who wanted to talk about all or any part of Matthew 25, Kevin's right. There's curricula available for us. There are films to watch. You know, I'm sure our friends at First South Bend would share the links to some of the things they've been watching and discussing. And maybe that adds some kindling to the fire that you want to encourage in your own midst. So let me know if there's anything that you think our folks could help you with as we try to emerge from all of this. One of the things Dr. Theo Harris said that I thought was compelling yesterday was it's really not enough to disperse the darkness, to quote a biblical text, that the whole point of the Poor People's Campaign and the point of the gospel is not just to lament, but to show people what's possible and to shine a light on what is happening and what is of good report and the differences we can make in our own communities and in our world. She talked about that wonderful metaphor about, when the tide rises, all the boats rise with it. When we lift from the bottom, which is what community organizing and our hope of doing ministry with people and not ministry for people, it's all about everybody rises. Our congregations benefit. We benefit as individuals. And especially if we do that all together. We've heard important reminders about burnout and how hard that is. And if we as a presbytery can help you in your setting, help the tide rise a little bit, all our boats will rise. And that's a good thing. And especially the people we most seek to serve with. As we dismantle and disengage and eradicate and do the beautiful revitalizing work of congregational vitality. All of it's beautiful work. All of it's beautiful work. Catherine Moran's on this call. She's our Matthew 25 detective in the presbytery. If you have a story to tell, let her decide if it's mundane or not. And then you won't be tooting your own horn. You'll just be telling Catherine a story and she'll help bring it to light. We want to share stories more broadly with the presbytery through God Calls and in minutes for Matthew 25 that you can use in your own setting and we can use at assemblies and in social media. So Catherine, would it be easy for you to put your email address in the chat? That might be helpful to folks so that if you have a little quiet horn you want to toot. I couldn't get my consonants and vowels all lined up right. If you want to help with that, there's Catherine's address in the chat, and she's really good at helping us celebrate. If you want some resources and some leads, I want to share quickly with you the web page one more time. I hope you have it bookmarked in your computers. This is where you find all the links to all the good stuff about Matthew 25, curricula, resources of other kinds, good language, great short videos that are very useful in worship and session meetings. All those points of intersection, Kim, that you were talking about, you know, because it's mission, it's faith formation, it's worship, it's all of it's stewardship. It's all of the above, right? And there's great stuff. You can see many things there and lots of inspiration, which is your per capita and your basic mission support at work. And finally, I want to especially tell you that, you know, probably not this week or the next, but if you're at all interested, if you've seen some snippets on the Presbytery's Facebook page, Phyllis Wiesman is a member at First South Bend. She's a career Christian educator. She won the Lifetime Achievement Award at APSE this year for that. We are sinfully proud of our connection with Phyllis Wiesman. She's the founder of Malawi Matters, the NGO that addresses HIV/AIDS programs in Malawi. I think that, you know, I think there are 3 Phyllis Wiesmans, and they each work 8-hour shifts because she has so much energy and so much passion for stuff. But Phyllis has been the catalyst at First South Bend for Matthew 25 work, and they really did a remarkable Lenten Easter study on racism that engaged something like 20 community agencies, their small but mighty congregation, the University of Notre Dame, authors, filmmakers, all kinds of people. And if you ever want any kind of inspiration, she would be most happy to be in touch with you. Sadly, she and her family are mourning the death of their adult son right now, and his memorial is I think weekend after next. So you might pause on contacting her, but you can find all her contact information on our Facebook page, and all you have to look at is First South Bend posts, and you'll see there Matthew 25 stuff. She's also written a curriculum that we give congregations when they initially sign on to be Matthew 25 congregations, and it now has a second volume of resources. If you haven't received that yet, let Vicki know in the Presbytery office, because you were supposed to receive those as gifts as well. So if you haven't received one or both of those resources, let us know, because that's a free gift from a member of your family, like Barrington Bunny used to say. Remember that? I'm dating myself. That has nothing to do with Matthew 25, or does it? I think we're close to being done today. Any closing thoughts, things for the good of the order that you'd like to share? Things that made you go, huh, what is she talking about? Or what did Kim say about their work?
There's another book that I would commend. And I believe some segment of the Presbytery studied it because that's how I heard about it. But The Person I Mean to Be.
Yeah.
Again, I think we at Bethany need to have a little bit of a conversation before we engage that material. But I found that it's a bit of a slog, but the basic principle is really, really good, which is most of us experience cognitive dissonance in thinking, oh, I'm not racist, and we dismiss that. And it really helps us to think about the ways that we participate in cultural norms that are racist.
Well said. Thank you, Kevin. That's a good Presbytery resource too, because it was our Committee on Representation that offered The Person You Mean to Be. I mean, good for you for adopting it as the person I mean to be, but the title is The Person You Mean to Be, and the author is Dolly Chugh, C-H-U-G-H, Dolly Chugh. And we have a whole bunch of resources on the Presbytery website at Committee on Representation about that, including a book study that we did on Facebook Live that is preserved until our hairstyles go out of style. You can find it by just looking for PWV Summer Book Study 2021, I think that's the right moniker for that. That's a great book, you're right. COR also commended and read and reviewed and offered to the Presbytery Valerie Carr's first book, K-A-U-R. She's a Sikh author, and let me grab the title for you. It's a fat book, but I want to say it's called See No Stranger by Valerie Carr, K-A-U-R. And I would not use the word slog in describing working through it. It's formidable. I mean, you're going to break your nose if you fall asleep reading it, because it's big and heavy. Why do I use that as an image? Anyway, another great book about other perspectives about diversity and inclusion and racism. And I thought it was really interesting from a Sikh, from the perspective of a Sikh with a strong academic background. Catherine.
I'm reading Holy Envy, Barbara Brown Taylor's.
Yeah.
I know it's a little old, but same thing. It's just helping that you see that you can't just think about it. You to go in and immerse yourself in it and meet with the people and let them tell you what they believe and what they say and all that. It was I'm finding it very helpful.
Another definition of ministry with, right? That we
Yes.
learn from.
Yes, 100%.
We learn
Yeah.
from.
And it's interesting because again, from a Christian standpoint, we all think we know, and then she's doing professor work where she's facing or 5 different things, including Christianity. And she said it was really interesting, even with Christianity, how her kids thought they knew, but they really don't know. And so it is, it's a religion 101 class. So she says, I can get into some things, but I can't get into others. And, but I thought, but it is a good, her premise and what she's working with would be good for some of our churches, because it is just a taste. It's not trying to force too much, but I'm finding from it that I think we could build something from that. So that's what I'm working.
Our interfaith discussions.
Yeah,
absolutely. Fantastic. So last offer from a member of your family is that if there are other things that you're thinking about, dreaming about, hoping for, and you think, oh man, the price tag. If you've got something that you want to do in the life of your congregation and you have a community partner, maybe it's someone you want to be in dialogue with or do ministry with, our local mission grants are a fantastic way to do that. And First South Bend received a considerable amount of support from the Presbytery to do their Matthew 25 Lenten series by applying for a mission grant and reminding us that their community partners were part of the grant. A local mission grant is not, we need you to pay for our floor wax because we'll be more hospitable if our floors are shining. That's kind of a stretch, right? That's sort of maintenance. But if you've got a community partner, that qualifies you right there, and some session endorsement. So Valpo, Bethany, Goshen, LaPorte, Auburn, Rochester. If you've got projects up your sleeves, mission initiatives, ministry with, just make sure who you're with is with, and be willing to name that. And there's local mission grant support, and all that information is on our website. So last commercial, but we always save, lovely parting gifts for the last thing we talk about. You get a car and you get a car. A secret wish to be Oprah. All right, I'm going to go and work on my Oprah imitation better. And if you all want to talk for a few minutes, you're welcome to stay on the call and visit with one another and pick each other's brains if you're able to stay. But the appointed hour is upon us to say thank you for being here. Let me tell you that our next Lunch and Learn and Listen offerings are exciting, and they're going to happen on the 12th and 19th of May. On the 12th, it's going to be 90 minutes instead of 60, and it's a writer's workshop with Gwyn Willis, who is a trained writer and workshop host on spiritual writing. And I'm just smitten with Gwyn Willis, who's an elder from Wabash Avenue, and is a delight to be with. So I hope you'll take time. It's meant to be a taste of this kind of writing workshop. We're hoping to offer something more substantial, a little more time consuming. Who knows if it'll be on Zoom or in person or at your church. But that's the 12th from 12 to 1:30 Eastern, 11 to 12:30 Central. And then the 19th, we're switching gears abruptly, and Kathy Riley from Presbyterian Disaster Assistance is going to be with us on the subject of responding to trauma, whether that's in your community or in your congregation. We had a host this winter of instances where congregations were directly involved with unnatural disasters, house fires, COVID-related kinds of things. And Kathy is an exceptional pastoral care provider and resource person. And if you know anything about Presbyterian disaster assistance, they are always spot on. And she's here to help pastoral leaders, elders, ministers, everybody with the whole subject of trauma, which seems to come up a lot in these days as we navigate our way through what has been and continues to be challenging. So hope you'll be with us for those. Pause with me for a moment of prayer, and then we'll sign off officially. And if you want to visit and have your dessert, you can linger in the narthex. Thanks for being with us. Let's pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks that you give us this virtual space to gather, that you remind us that we are not alone in our commitments to you, in our yearning for justice, our thirst for peace, our commitment to creating the world that you share with us in abundance for all. Help us in all that we do not to grow weary. Help us in all that we do to drink deeply from the well of your love and your mercy and your grace, recognizing that whenever we see someone who is hungry or thirsty or naked or in prison, we've seen you. You call us to respond. Thank you for the opportunity and the privilege to gather with siblings in your name. Amen. Righty, thanks so much. Take good care. Hope to see you soon. Be well.
Hey, Vicki and Jennifer, actually. Vicki, I can say, yeah, okay, the two of us. Did you hear from Jill that I am willing to take over God Calls?
Yes, and we appreciate that. Jennifer and I have been talking, after Jill told us, and we're going to kind of re-envision that. So yeah, we'll be in conversation with you about that
Okay.
after we kind of do, as Jennifer calls it, kind of an exit interview with Jill to
Yeah.
find out what her, take is on, what we
Yeah.
need to improve. But boy, I was telling Jennifer, we used to have about a 30, maybe 35% rate, and which was really good. Paul Myrie, I remember when we first started this, he said, oh my goodness, he said, for you to get that many hits, he said, that's a high rate for a newsletter.
Yeah.
So we feel like, it's really a very beneficial, very needed. And I don't know if you remember when we did a survey to see if we should do away with it when, when they scaled down again, and it came back resounding that it was, one of the best bridge builders with the congregations. So we kept at it. Well, now we're getting about 49% hit rate. That's a pretty high rate for, a newsletter, but do we need to, I feel like we need to have, we need to lift up our congregations more, there's just some things. So we're looking at, possibly doing having some regional people help us get that information, because you can ask all you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, it's like a church newsletter. You ask, but you just don't
You just don't get it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, like she said, I'm supposed to be talking to folks about Matthew 25, and I've reached out to all those churches and said, send me things, but again, you ask, but then they don't pursue it. Yeah. And that's what Jill was saying. That's the hardest part, is trying to find good content for it. And I was feeling the same pressure at why I first said, well, no, I don't want to do that, because it is a lot of work to have to dig after those things. But I've asked and got session approval at Bethany to revamp their website. And that's what got me thinking, well, if I'm working on theirs to kind of get information, that's what led me to thinking, but I really enjoy working on God Calls for the same reason. I feel connected, and I'm, connecting to other folks. So in whatever capacity I can help, that's what I was thinking, that I really don't want to give it up. I really enjoy being a part of it, because it does, you do get to hear things and see things that are important. And I'm hoping, because part of it obviously was the COVID thing, that we, people just weren't doing things, so that nothing was, and I wasn't really pursuing those things. But hopefully now that we're going to be opening back up and we can see each other again, I was realizing that gives me something to talk to people about, that when we go to Presbyterian, all these different things. So since I'm honorably retired, I was thinking, what do I have to talk to other people about? And so that I just wanted to share that with you and Jennifer, that it is something that I'm now realizing that it is a way to keep connected. So I'd really like to do whatever I can. So I appreciate being thought of in that vein. So, but if you've got other people, that's fine too. But
we don't. We're just really trying to think very intentional about it, because it is a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do we make it, or how do we lift our congregations up? And it will, I think it, as Jennifer and I talked it through, I said, I really believe it's going to take somebody in
Each area.
multiple, in areas of the presbytery that can help draw that information out.
And actually, that's not a bad idea in the sense of it making it a team effort to bring content in, because as you say, even if three group of the four say, I haven't found anything this time, at least maybe one of the four says, yes, I've got something. And so it is a way to hopefully have good content, but it also provides us the opportunity to talk about each thing and say, is this appropriate? And because I know that's what Jill, she, say, is this okay to put in? And I was thinking that same thing. Who who am I speaking to be able to say, is this okay? So I like the idea of a group that would work on it, and each person having their responsibility. I think then that makes it clear, yeah, who's taking care of what. But yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'm hopeful. That sounds very positive and hopeful for really good content.
Yeah, I think so too, because it was hard for me when I was doing it alone to, as you said, determine, is this appropriate for?
I like it, but does it going to offend anybody else? And I recognize there's been a couple times where obviously we put something in, and I know one of them was mine when I had put just Barb Kinley as bridge pastor at Rossville, because I knew that Fowler is closing because my husband's on the AC. So I didn't think to list her there, but apparently someone got upset about that. And you know, it is all those kinds of things. You just never know how people are going to read things. And
right. Yep. I said, I can read it and read it and read it, and it sounds good. And the minute I hit send, it's like, oh, that wasn't, that shouldn't have gone. But it's gone.
Like this morning, it said, you know, tomorrow, you know, and it was like, wait, isn't that today? And I had to think about it. I had to look at my calendar. Wait, no, it is today, isn't it?
So that one shined. I saw that one immediately. And yeah.
And that's what Jill goes, I didn't even catch it. So yeah, it is surprising how you need many brains on it, because it can't get all those things in one person. So yeah, it's good to be a team. So well good. I said everything, so I thought I wanted to make sure that got passed along. And she's agreeing to work until the end of June, though. Is that correct? I believe.
Right. She said that the June 30th is going to be her last issue. So
we have some time to process, but and it could be that, and I'm willing, just to let you know this too, that if you haven't found everybody by that 1st of July, I can take over and just do something, you know, do it for a while on my own if that's the case. But hopefully by then you'll have found other folks who are interested, but just to make sure that it doesn't get dropped, you know, that the ball continues to roll. So
yeah, it's one of those pieces. I think that it
keeps us connected. Yeah, it keeps us, and like I said, I really enjoy it. And I too had noted that, boy, you know, it really is. I mean, yes, we have what, 11, almost 1,200 emails. And so, you know, you're thinking, well, but you're still hitting close to 500-600 people that are actively opening it up. That's quite a few folks that are, you know, keeping the presbytery connected. And that's what we want. So yeah.
I went through a little bit yesterday and cleaned out some of the emails that you know, aren't
just happen.
They lost connection. So try to get some more of those cleaned out as I go.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Catherine.
It's good talking
so
to
good
you.
To see you.
I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon, hopefully.
I know.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.